Wasn't the favorite, I never was, and I made peace with that somewhere around age 19, sitting alone in my car outside my parents' house after my brother's birthday dinner, the one nobody bothered to tell me had been moved up by 3 hours. I drove 40 minutes in November sleet for a kitchen full of dirty plates and a leftover slice of chocolate cake wrapped in plastic on the counter. There was a sticky note on it. It said for the dog. The dog's name was Biscuit. I am not Biscuit. But I kept showing up. That's the thing about me. I kept showing up. My name doesn't matter as much as my role, and my role in this family was simple. I was the one who handled things. My younger brother, let's call him what our parents called him, which was the sensitive one, cried at commercials and couldn't parallel park, and somehow turned both of those qualities into a personality that made every adult in the room want to protect him. He's 31 years old. He's never filed his own taxes. I know this because for 6 years, I filed them for him. He'd text me a photo of his T4 slip sometime in late March, always with a string of emojis that ended in a pair of hands pressed together. I'd send back the confirmation number. He never once said thank you with words. Just more emojis. His fiance's name is Brittany. She's the kind of person who uses the word literally 14 times in a single sentence and means it as punctuation, not emphasis. She refers to herself as low maintenance while simultaneously requiring 4 people to manage her emotions at any given moment. I tried to like her. I genuinely tried. When my brother first brought her home to our parents' place in Barrie for Thanksgiving 3 years ago, I sat next to her at the table and asked about her work, her family, what she liked to do. She told me she didn't really vibe with people who asked a lot of questions. Then she turned to my mother and said the stuffing was almost as good as her mom's. My mother beamed at her. I passed the cranberry sauce to nobody in particular and told myself it was fine. Here's what I contributed to their engagement party, which was held at my parents' house last September. I drove up from Mississauga on a Friday night after a full week of work, arrived at 11 p.m., unloaded my car in the rain, and spent the next morning rearranging the furniture in the living room, hanging string lights on the back deck, and assembling a charcuterie spread that cost me $340 at the grocery store because Brittany had announced she wanted that aesthetic. I also bought 2 cases of craft beer because my brother said the party needed something elevated. I paid for the rental chairs because my mother said her back was bad. I ordered the custom cake because my father said they were a bit short that month. Nobody asked me to do any of this. That was the thing. They just sort of stood back and let the space exist, and I filled it. I always filled it. I'm an occupational therapist. I've been working at a rehabilitation clinic in Mississauga for 7 years, and I'm good at my job. Genuinely good. Which means I spend my days helping people figure out how to function in a world that wasn't built for their circumstances. I notice what people need before they say it. I adjust. I compensate. I make things work. You'd think I would have seen it sooner, that I was doing the exact same thing in my own family that I did for a living, except at work, I got paid. The wedding was set for late June. Muskoka, which if you've never tried to book a wedding venue in Muskoka, is approximately the same as trying to book a seat on the moon. The venue they wanted had a deposit of $4,000 due in January, non-refundable. My brother called me in December. Not to ask exactly, just to mention it, the way you mention the weather. Hey, so the deposit's coming up, and things are just a bit tight right now. You know how it is. I did not say, how is it exactly, given that you work full-time and live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Guelph with 1 other person and no dependents. I said, I'll take care of it. I took care of it. I also covered the photographer's retainer in February $2,200 because Brittany had her heart set on a specific woman whose work she'd found on Instagram, someone who did this thing with golden hour light that Brittany described as literally transcendent. I paid the florist a deposit of $1,500 in March. I booked and prepaid the shuttle service for out-of-town guests, which came to $860. I bought my brother's suit because he mentioned, entirely casually, that he hadn't gotten around to it, and the wedding was in 11 weeks. By the time May arrived, I had put just over $12,000 into a wedding that was not mine. I want to be clear, nobody held a gun to my head. I made choices. I'm aware of that. But there is a particular kind of coercion that lives inside a family, quiet and pressureless and completely invisible from the outside. And it works like this. You know, with a certainty that lives in your stomach rather than your brain, that if you don't do it, it won't get done. And the fallout will somehow, in some configuration you can't fully predict, but can absolutely feel coming, become your fault. So you do it. You do it, and you tell yourself it's love. Because what else would you call it? I called it love for a long time. The text came on a Tuesday. I was eating lunch at my desk, a sad little container of leftover pasta that I'd made Sunday night in a burst of optimism about the week ahead. My phone lit up, and it was my brother. Not a call, a text. Hey, so, Britton and I have been talking, and we've decided to keep the wedding really intimate, like immediate family and close friends only. We're scaling back the guest list a lot. We both just feel like the energy needs to be right, you know? I hope you understand. You'll always be my sister. But we want the day to feel really curated. Love you. I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone face down on my desk and finished my pasta. I want to tell you that I immediately knew what to do. That some clear and righteous part of me snapped into focus and I acted with precision and calm. That's not what happened. What happened was that I sat at my desk for the rest of my lunch break, staring at a patient file I wasn't reading. And then I went to the bathroom and sat in the last stall for a few minutes just breathing, not crying. I didn't cry. I was too confused to cry, which sounds strange, but when something hits a certain level of surreal, the emotional system seems to need extra processing time. My brain kept snagging on the phrase really curated, like I was an item that hadn't made the cut, a throw pillow that didn't match the vision. I texted back, "Got it. Take care." I sat with it for the rest of the afternoon. I thought about calling my mother, but I already knew what she'd say. She'd say, "You know how Brittany is, and your brother really loves you, and don't make this into a big thing." My mother has been conflict avoiding for so long that I think she's forgotten conflict is sometimes just honesty with a louder voice. I thought about calling a friend, but I didn't want to explain the whole architecture of my family from the ground up, which is what it always requires. There's no short version. The short version sounds too dramatic, and the accurate version takes too long. So I opened my laptop and I went to my email and I looked at every booking confirmation I had saved in the folder I'd labeled. With some private optimism that now felt faintly embarrassing, Jamie and Britt wedding. Florist. Photographer. Shuttle service. Venue deposit record. I looked at all of it for a while. Then I started making calls. The florist picked up on the second ring. Her name was Donna, and she had a voice like someone who'd heard a lot of things in her life and was genuinely hard to surprise. I explained that there had been a significant change of plans and I needed to cancel the order. She asked if I was the one who'd placed it. I said yes. She confirmed my name, pulled up the file, and said she was sorry to hear it. The deposit was mine to keep. Sorry, she meant the portion beyond what they'd spent on pre-orders, which she'd have to calculate. She'd send me an email. I thanked her and hung up. The photographer was trickier. She was warm and apologetic, and she explained that her contract had a 60-day cancellation window for partial refund, and we were inside it, which meant the retainer was forfeit. I told her I understood. I didn't fight it. It wasn't her fault. The shuttle company had a cancellation policy buried in their terms that I'd apparently agreed to without reading closely enough, which meant I got back roughly half. Fine. Each call took maybe 10 minutes. By 6:30, I had canceled everything that could be canceled, flagged the ones I couldn't, and sent a single, clear email to the venue coordinator explaining that the wedding was no longer going ahead as planned under my financial sponsorship, and that any future arrangements would need to be renegotiated directly with the couple. I closed my laptop, I made tea. I stood at my kitchen window in the blue early evening light, watching a pair of Canada geese walk single file across the parking lot behind my building with a confidence that, frankly, I admired. And I felt not good, exactly, but clean. The way you feel after you've finally thrown out something that you knew was expired but kept putting back in the fridge anyway. My phone started ringing at 7:43. My brother. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. Then my mother called. Then a number I didn't recognize, which I suspected was Brittany calling from somewhere else because she'd learned I had her contact blocked. I had her contact blocked because twice in the past year she'd sent me passive-aggressive voice messages at 2 in the morning about things I'd said at family dinners, and I decided my sleep was worth more than her access. I didn't answer any of them. I drew a bath. I put on a podcast about the history of the Hudson's Bay Company, which sounds like a strange choice, but I find economic history deeply calming in a crisis, something about the long view of time. I stayed in the bath until the water went cold, and the podcast host was explaining the 1821 merger with the Northwest Company. And I thought, idly, that everything eventually consolidates or collapses, and both outcomes require someone to deal with the paperwork. The voicemails came in clusters. My brother's first one was confused. "Hey, what's going on? Donna from the flower place just called. Britt, can you call me back?" The second was less confused and more agitated. "Okay, so I'm getting calls from the shuttle company now. What did you do? Please just call me." My mother's was the kind of quietly accusatory that she's spent a lifetime perfecting, where the accusation is technically absent but structurally present in every syllable. "Honey, I'm not sure what's happening, but I think we should talk before anything gets out of hand." The unknown number left no message. I listened to all of them the next morning with my coffee. Then I typed out a response to my brother. I took my time with it. I wrote and deleted several drafts, not because I was trying to be cruel, I wasn't, but because I wanted to be precise. I wanted there to be no sentence in it that he could credibly misread, no phrase that left interpretive room. I've spent 7 years in a profession where imprecise communication causes real harm to real people, and I've gotten careful about it. The final version said something like this: "I supported this wedding because I love you and I wanted to be part of it. When you let me know that I'm not part of it, the support I was providing no longer made sense. I canceled the arrangements I had made and paid for personally. I'm sorry for the disruption to your planning. I hope you're able to sort things out." I sent it. I put my phone in my bag. I went to work. I won't pretend the next 2 weeks were easy. They weren't. There's a particular grief in realizing that your role in a family has been, at least in part, financial, that the warmth directed at you was connected, however unconsciously, to what you provided. I don't think my brother sat down and made a calculated decision to use me. I don't think it was malicious in a clean, legible way. That almost would have been easier. Instead, it was something slower and more ambient, an accumulated assumption that I would handle things, that I wanted to handle things, that handling things was simply my nature rather than a choice I renewed, quietly, every time. My mother called every few days. The conversations had a script. She would begin with a version of, "We need to figure this out in progress," toward a version of, "You're being very hard," with several variations in between. She said that Brittany was devastated. I said I understood that. She said the vendors were refusing to work with them at the original prices because the contracts had been canceled. I said I understood that too. She said my father was upset. I asked if he was upset that I'd been excluded from the wedding, or upset about the vendors. She didn't answer that one directly. My brother and I spoke once. It was 10 days after the text. He called on a Sunday afternoon, which is when he knows I'm usually home, which meant he'd been thinking about when to do it. I'll give him that. He started by saying he wanted to explain, and I said, "Okay, go ahead." He said Brittany had felt overwhelmed by the guest list and wanted something smaller. I said I understood that. He said it wasn't personal. I said I also understood that, in the sense that I didn't think he lay awake at night plotting to wound me. But that being told I wasn't family enough to attend, while also being the person who'd put $12,000 into the event, was something I was having a hard time parsing as not personal. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We were going to pay you back." I asked when. He said they were figuring it out. I said, gently, that I hoped they did. He said, "You know this isn't just about money, right?" And I thought about that. I thought about the birthday dinner, and the sticky note on the cake, and the Thanksgiving table, and the December phone call, and the suit, and the deposits, and 7 years of tax returns filed from my apartment in Mississauga at 9 o'clock at night, with a glass of wine and Biscuit the dog, not even, being around anymore because Biscuit had been a good dog and had passed away peacefully in 2023. I thought about all of it in about 3 seconds. I said, I know, the wedding happened. A smaller version of it. I got this information from my cousin, who is the family's unofficial wire service and who texted me a photo of herself in a sundress with a glass of rosé. Apparently my parents covered what they could and my brother's friends chipped in for the rest. The florist did a scaled-back version with whatever hadn't been pre-ordered. The venue held. The photographer was replaced by someone from Facebook Marketplace at a quarter of the price, a quarter to my cousin, who had opinions about the lighting. I spent that Saturday in late June doing something I'd been meaning to do for 3 years. I drove up to Algonquin Park alone, rented a canoe for the afternoon, and paddled out into a lake so quiet I could hear the water dripping off my paddle between strokes. I ate a sandwich I'd made that morning. I watched a loon surface about 20 feet away, look at me with its red eye in that ancient, indifferent way loons have, and dive back under. I didn't feel sorry for myself. That surprised me. I felt, and this took me a while to name, I felt light, like I'd been carrying something so long that I'd stopped registering its weight, and now that it was set down, the absence of it was almost disorienting. I kept expecting the familiar low-grade anxiety that followed me into family situations. That particular low hum of will this be okay, will I do enough, is this enough? It wasn't there. The loon surfaced again, farther away this time. I watched it until it dived. That fall, I set some new parameters for myself. Nothing dramatic, nothing announced. I just quietly stopped volunteering. If someone asked directly, I'd consider it. If they assumed, I'd let the assumption sit unanswered, until it dissolved on its own. It wasn't punishment. It was, I think, just finally the truth about what I was and wasn't able to give. My brother and I are in an odd place. We text sometimes, hockey scores, the occasional meme, once a photo of a dog that looked like Biscuit. It's not warm exactly, but it's not cold either. It's the temperature of a relationship that both people are still deciding what to do with. I think we both know something shifted. I think he knows what it was. I don't know if we'll ever say it plainly to each other. And I've made a kind of peace with that not happening. My mother asked me at Christmas, while we were washing dishes, whether I was happy. She asked it carefully. The way you ask something when you already know the answer is complicated. I thought about it honestly before I answered, which I think she noticed. I told her I was getting there. She handed me the roasting pan to dry and didn't say anything else. And that was, I think, as close as we've ever come to understanding each other without the full script. I still drive to Algonquin sometimes when things feel accumulated. I sit in that canoe and I let the water do what water does, which is move steadily in a direction without needing anyone to explain why. There's something instructive in that. Something I'm still learning to apply. You can spend a long time making yourself indispensable and confuse it for being loved. Those are two different things. I know that now in a way I couldn't have articulated 3 years ago, not even to myself. The knowing doesn't fix everything, but it changes what you're willing to carry forward, and that, I think, is where it starts. There's a moment on the water when the paddle clears the surface and everything goes quiet, just the drip, and the distance, and the sound of your own breathing. I keep coming back to that feeling. Not because it solved anything, but because it was the first time in years I wasn't trying to solve something for someone else. I think about what I did and didn't do in those years with my brother, and I've had to be honest with myself about both sides of it. The honest version isn't flattering, but it's useful. I spent a long time confusing generosity with identity. I told myself I was helping because I loved him, and that was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Part of it was that being the one who handled things gave me a shape in the family. It gave me a reason to be in the room. When that stopped being enough, when I got that text and realized the room had quietly closed its door, I had to figure out who I was without the function. That takes something. It takes a kind of honesty that isn't comfortable, the kind where you sit with what actually happened instead of the version that makes you the uncomplicated good person. I wasn't uncomplicated. I enabled a dynamic for years because it was easier than naming it. I filed tax returns at 9 o'clock at night and called it love instead of calling it what it also was, which was avoidance. Avoiding the conversation, avoiding the confrontation, avoiding the specific discomfort of saying out loud, "This isn't working and we need to talk about it." When I finally stopped, not out of strategy, not to punish anyone, just because continuing no longer made sense, something shifted that I hadn't expected. The canceling of those vendors wasn't revenge. It was just the logical conclusion of a boundary I should have drawn years earlier. The courage wasn't in the phone calls. The courage was in letting the fallout happen without rushing in to manage it. And the fallout was uncomfortable. My mother's careful silences, my brother's confusion, the version of events that circulated at Christmas where I was the difficult one, the one who made things hard. I sat with all of that without explaining myself into exhaustion, and that, I think, was the hardest part. Not the action, the stillness after. What I've come to understand, slowly, is that the capacity to think clearly about your own life, not what you're told to want, not what you're told to want, not what keeps the peace, but what is actually true, is something you have to protect deliberately. It doesn't maintain itself. Every time I filled a role that wasn't mine to fill, I was quietly trading that clarity for comfort that wasn't even comfortable. It was just familiar. And persistence, the kind that matters, isn't stubbornness. It's not holding a grudge. It's waking up the next day and choosing, again, to live according to what you actually believe rather than what's easiest to defend at a family dinner. That's the slower work. That's what the canoe is about. That's what the loon was about, surfacing and diving without needing anyone to witness it. I'm still learning how to be a person who doesn't need to be useful to feel like she belongs. It's slower going than I'd like. But I'm on the water, and I'm moving. And that's enough for now.